We'll go ahead and we'll be getting started shortly. Just give ourselves a few extra seconds for everyone to come on the call. We have some really exciting things to share with you this evening. And we also want to honor your time and finish right at 7:30. So let's go ahead and get started. First, before we start, I would like to introduce our mayor, Mayor Adam Rack, who would like to say a few introductory remarks. Adam, take it away.
Great. Thank you, Lisa, and welcome everyone. And really great to have everyone here. I have to say, I couldn't wait for the meeting. I stopped in to see Lisa earlier, so she gave me a sneak preview, and it is really exciting. And I'm certainly really excited about the downtown and the future and the transformation that we are going to do here. I'll give you a little anecdote. I spoke last week to a second and third grade group of students from charter school, and I also spoke to a Cub Scout pack and took questions. And one of the things that we talked about was the downtown and how valuable it is and how much people love it. And when I told people that we were closing the 700 block permanently, in both cases, the parents erupted in applause, which I've never had before. So obviously there's a lot of interest, a lot of support for what we're doing, and appreciate you coming on here to help share your ideas. So I went off script, so Lisa hopefully won't be mad at me. But I really want to welcome everyone to this third community workshop to really discuss what were these possibilities for our downtown. And which we started off in 2022. We were at the November 27th City Council meeting, we voted to close the 700 block permanently, which really provides us the flexibility and the opportunity to do some of the many ideas that we would like to move forward and discuss with you tonight. So it's certainly been an ambitious planning initiative to really have this shared vision for the future of our downtown. And really, as mayor, on behalf of the full city council, our goal is to ensure that the downtown meets the needs and aspirations of our entire community and the businesses now and well into the future. Tonight we're going to focus on some new ideas for downtown. We have a couple very exciting design ideas for a full permanent closure of the 700 block of Laurel Street, and ideas for both the 600 and 800 blocks of Laurel Street, plus some concepts for St. Carlos Avenue, all for you to sort of look at, get your thoughts on. And we're looking at also some design for our public spaces, a mix of program and activation ideas, as well as public access and how we move or circulate in the downtown area. So really excited to get all your participation. I want to thank you for being a part of that. I think we have some of our, maybe our planning commission staff, our DTAC, which is our downtown advisory commission staff, participants on here as well, and city staff and our consultant team. And we really want to work with you to create that vision that captures our hopes and hopes for the future. So thank you all for joining. When we did the permanent closure, I said that this is going to be a transformative time for our community and for the downtown, that I really think we will be a destination for the entire peninsula and the envy of all the peninsula for what we're able to create here. So we're excited for it. I want to thank everyone for being here, and I will pass it back to Lisa. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Mayor Rack, for kicking us off tonight. And our team is certainly very, very excited to be able to present some very new and fresh ideas to the community. Before we get started, I just wanted to introduce the city team to the community. Joining us here this evening, we have Al Sabay, our Community and Economic Development Director, myself, Lisa Porras. I am the project manager for this project. Also joining me is Akanksha Chopra, an associate planner, Sajudi Hawk, our senior management analyst, and Lynette Kwok, our senior administrative clerk. It takes this team and more to make all of this happen. On the consultant side, our new consultant team, who's going to be sharing a lot with you this evening, is WRT. Primarily tonight, we have James Stickley, Poonam Narkar. She is the project manager. On the consultant side, we have Rohit Tak, Ashwin Nambiar. And just to let you know that this consultant team is supported by a host of sub-consultants with different specialties to really provide a robust and technical expert review of all of the ideas that we are going to be considering. So with that, if we can go to the next slide, for tonight's agenda, we're going to be sharing with you a 30-minute presentation of a lot of new ideas that we want to get for your consideration and feedback. And then we are going to be breaking out into individual groups where you can spend some time with city staff and the consultant team and sharing your reaction, your thoughts, your ideas, or any concerns you might have about some of the things that you're going to hear about tonight. And then we will be reporting back so that everyone can hear back from each group. And then we'll be closing this workshop, this virtual workshop tonight by 7:30 and share a couple of closing remarks and next steps where we're headed after this. So let's go ahead and get right into the presentation. I am going to turn it over to Poonam Narkar with WRT. Poonam?
Thank you, Lisa, and welcome everyone. We are very excited to share some concepts that we have with all of you. The next few slides that you're going to be seeing are just going to help frame what the thinking is behind the concept. So bear with me. I'm going to go pretty quickly so that we can get to the exciting slides with the concepts. So the reason that there was a whole host of existing conditions analysis that was conducted by our team, but we have just a select few slides here to really show how we are thinking about these concepts. As you know, the downtown San Carlos planning area is this nice, quaint main street of the community, and we have heard a lot about how that is the heart of the community. But we wanted to understand and recognize the adjacencies of what is around the downtown, the East Side Innovation District, that's the up and coming district and a major job center on the eastern side, and how the Northeast area specific plan, how all of these other planning areas would be connected to downtown, and how might we leverage the synergy of having these different important new development sort of feed off of each other. We started to really, ask ourselves to understand how do we access the downtown, as in how is the city, how is the community getting to downtown? And this diagram really shows what the key corridors are. El Camino Real being a major major state highway. The arterial roads such as Holly and San Carlos and Britton Avenue that really get everybody off 101 and into the downtown, and Arroyo Avenue, which is a significant connector between the downtown and East Side Innovation District. And what we realize is that there are these key points along El Camino Real that really serve as the gateway into the downtown. So what does that mean? And how do we want to treat them? And what kind of attention do these intersections require? There's a lot of activity in the downtown, but we wanted to understand at a finer grain what's happening at the ground level. There is a diverse, there are businesses such as restaurants, there are small commercial retail, there are commercial offices, and all of these have a certain level of activation along Laurel Street as well as San Carlos Avenue. How is the downtown doing? We heard that the residents are very, very excited with the 700 block closure of Laurel Street. We are very excited about the new opportunities that the block closure is going to provide. The community's aspiration is to see what this block can transform into. But along with that, what happens on either side of 700 block? How is the 600 and 800 block going to also transform and sort of create a cohesive environment? But while there are some really good things that are working in favor of the downtown, there are also some areas that need improvement in terms of staying competitive, if you will, with other neighboring communities. Making sure that all the businesses are equitably served with the types of improvements that happen along Laurel Street. We want to make sure that any particular type of business is not taking over or dominating the experience. And so there are some areas from an economic perspective that that this team is going to be looking at in order to create that diversity of experiences, diversity of uses to serve the needs of the community. We have this slide as an example. We sort of started looking at some other communities, which are comparable communities in order to understand, it's mostly like lessons learned and understand how these other communities who may have gone through similar transformations, what has worked there and what has not worked there, and what can be learned from these communities for San Carlos. So for example, the two examples, one in Castro Street in Mountain View and Burlingame Avenue, these two are closer home, and they're quite comparable in terms of the types, the demographics, or in terms of the physical environment and the location of the downtowns. What's interesting is Castro Street in Mountain View is they are also moving forward with the closure of some blocks, and they have decided to close 3 blocks on Castro Street. Burlingame Avenue does not have any block closure, but it is a 5-block long corridor. And then Pearl Street in Boulder was an example that was included because that came up as an example that a number of people had mentioned to us. And so we wanted to understand what is working at Pearl Street and what is, what can we learn from it. And one of the interesting pieces of Pearl Street is that out of the 14-block long commercial portion along Pearl Street, only 4 blocks are pedestrianized. We also looked at how each of these 3 case studies fare in terms of the diversity of businesses, in terms of the activation, at different times of the day, and how is the parking addressed, and so on and so forth. So I will not go into the details of these case studies, but do know that this information is going to be available. And then really moving on to what is the vision for downtown San Carlos. This vision statement captures some of the work that was done by your DTAG, the Downtown Advisory Committee, and you will be seeing the statement, the vision statement, and guiding principles also at the breakout session. So the things that really we wanted to highlight from the vision statement was downtown as a heart of San Carlos, a place of celebration and community gathering, a place of diverse and authentic experiences, an inclusive space that invites everybody and all users, and along with being a sustainable district that supports ecology and community health and well-being. As we looked at the list of guiding principles, there were really these 4 themes that emerged very strongly, and we have grouped them into these 4 categories of mobility and connectivity, downtown vibrancy, placemaking and identity, and equity and resilience. In placemaking and identity, we really are looking at what is the character of the downtown core, and what are the aspects and the assets within the downtown that will actually give it a distinct identity. We also recognize the importance of the civic center, the proximity of the civic center, and the importance of connecting downtown to the civic center through improved pedestrian pathways. And then making the connection along Laurel Street and continuing some of that experience to Mid Laurel and the SOLA districts, and so in order to leverage that the energy that is created in the downtown and catalyze development in these other districts as well. Downtown vibrancy really looks at the different uses, the diversity of uses, and how future uses would be located and placed within the downtown core, the Mid Laurel district along El Camino Real, to again support the vision for creating a pedestrian-oriented, diverse district. And then mobility and connectivity is a very important aspect that really supports the vision, because how do we get to downtown? How do we move around downtown? And what are the modes of transport and mobility choices that we have in order to enjoy the downtown are equally important. So all of these three frameworks and along with equity and resilience really informed the design concepts that we are going to be sharing tonight. I'm going to hand it over to Jim Stickley.
Great, thanks, Poonam. So we're in the three diagrams that Poonam presented, looking at mobility and downtown vitality. 700 block is really so central to the success of the downtown, and its closure is something that is very strongly supported by the community. And I think what this plan wants to do is really take that closure seriously, to build upon the idea of the street closure, not only to have a street with a barrier at each end, but to really create a public space here that can accommodate all kinds of different downtown activities in the same way that a public plaza might do. So really sort of changing this from a street to a very nicely designed public space. So we've just jumped right in to the 700 block, and we've developed two sort of very conceptual approaches to that space. And I'm going to just present those very quickly, each individually. The first one is called the Promenade, and it's very linear, very urban. It really focuses on a building face to building face space. So getting rid of the street curbs and making this a continuous plaza surface. This would really stress outdoor dining, a much wider space for outdoor dining on the edges, and a central promenade for strolling and for the programming of different uses. And you can see on this diagram all of the different kinds of uses that we've been hearing a lot from the community, of things that they want to happen, places for seating, places for shade, places for outdoor dining, of course, building upon what's going on there now, but also spaces that can be used for special events, for performances, concerts, etc. So going to the next slide, we can see just some illustrations of how some of those functions could exist in the two each end of this block. So in this sort of linear part of the plaza, the promenade portion, how could that work? Introducing outdoor dining. You can see the photo in the center top, what a street looks like when it's been redesigned from building face to building face with no curbs. A much more plaza-like environment. You can start to integrate public art and interpretive elements. And in the next slide, this focuses, if you can just advance one slide. This focuses on the central portion of the block, and it's capitalizing on the current use of Harrington Park and creating a stage there and an event lawn, but really formalizing that into something that can create have a lot of heavy use. Right now, it's a bit trampled. It gets a lot of use during certain festivals. So how do we make that into a permanent venue that really is successful in accommodating different types of events? And you can see some images of examples in other places where that's happened. This also has sort of a water play element in the center plaza. And you can see an image there, number 3, that it's very interactive. That's one approach to introducing water into a space like this. And it can be programmed in other ways, having games like ping pong and chess and things like that, places for public art, and then a continued flexible use of the Bank of America parking lot. They're very good about accommodating activities during special events, and a continued use of that space could really be a nice supplement to this central core of activities. And then the next slide, this is now a second scheme that we looked at. It's called the Gardens. This one is a little bit more green, a heavier green element, if you will, groves of trees trees that sort of alternate back and forth from one side to the other, and then a promenade path that sort of winds between those. Still, there's a very heavy promenade function, but this one has, you know, just a lot more attention to planted areas, to shady groves, to garden areas. In some instances, those groves could have activities underneath them. If you go to the next slide, you can see some images of how that might happen. This center image on the top is from Charlottesville, where they've done a similar approach. They've retained these groves, but they exist in sort of an informal way. That could be, as I said, planted underneath, or it could be hard paved, so it could accommodate outdoor dining or other program elements, and still accommodating a very heavy dose of outdoor dining on the edges in front of the, you know, the various restaurants, and then other spaces to accommodate a variety of other program games, places for you know, teens to hang out, places for kids to play, etc. And then in the next slide, a little bit different approach to the center plaza area. This one might have an events plaza instead of a lawn. It might have a place, more of a linear fountain that's more structured, more sculptural, but similar to the other scheme, places for public art and for flexible events, outdoor performances, etc. And then as we move on, we've developed this scheme also for the 600 block. And this really is being seen as something that could be quite integrated with the 700 block, even as it allows for automobile circulation and parking. But how do you take those functions and put them in a context that looks more like a public space, more like a plaza, and is more unified with the improvements that are made to the 700 block? So it's all kind of working together. And the Wheeler Plaza offers another opportunity to have a plaza space that might actually come out and extend right across the street, and to be able to be used for different functions. And in the next slide, you can see some illustrations of what some of those functions might look like. So really viewing this as the gateway to downtown when you come off of San Carlos from the train station. And looking first at the length of the street and how that might be reorganized to allow more space for sidewalks and stormwater management gardens. And then the vehicular space might be a little bit more constrained, but still allow for two-way traffic, still allow for some on-street parking and some other curb uses. But the main change would be much wider sidewalks, so much more room for outdoor dining and more room for circulation. And in the next slide, just some ideas about what Wheeler Plaza itself might look like. We've looked at this as eventually maybe a food hall type of venue where different venues could and vendors could be under one roof, and they could people could take their food out into the plaza and sit in outdoor seating. That could start out as a pop-up using containers, which has been done in many instances, you know, as sort of a catalytic move, a first step towards activating a space. So something like that could very easily happen in Wheeler Plaza. And then, as I said before, that feeling of plaza could just extend right across the street. So when you come from San Carlos and you turn onto Laurel Street, it's almost like you're entering into a plaza rather than turning onto a street. However, cars could still freely flow back and forth. You would still have access to that, except in the time of special events. And next slide. So all of these proposals have a specific outcome in terms of the street design itself. So in this 600 block scheme, which is an approach that could also be taken with the 800 block, we looked at two different alternatives. One would widen the sidewalks quite a bit, and then allow on-street parking on both sides, and then a little bit narrower traffic lanes. But the big change here is that we would change from diagonal parking to parallel parking. So it would be a small reduction in the number of parking spaces, but it creates more room for the sidewalk, still room for stormwater gardens, and then still room to have a robust street tree strip with a continuous soil trench, which would be very important for greening. And then in the next slide, a little bit more extensive change. This says that actually the sidewalks, we'd ideally like to widen them a little bit more. So this gets you almost 20 feet of sidewalk, 19.5 feet if you see the cross section. And then the parking would be only on one side of the street, but that would switch back and forth as you go down the street, with the travel lanes sort of weaving their way back and forth to access those. So this would be a reduction in parking, but it would allow considerably more space in the sidewalk for outdoor dining, and still plenty of space for circulation. And then, as I said before, the materials you use in the street on the sidewalk could be unified with the materials you're using in the 700 block. So this would all really read as one continuous downtown space. And then as we move forward in the next slide, once you dedicate the downtown to a more strongly pedestrian program and pedestrian function, other changes might want to happen to facilitate vehicular flows around the downtown. So, which streets are important to be more pedestrian in their character and function, and then what other streets can adjust to accommodate the vehicular flows that will still be needed. So we're looking at San Carlos as a street that sort of has a dual function. It's an important circulation street for vehicles as they come in and out of town, but it's also an important pedestrian connector to the train station, getting people from there to Laurel Street and to the downtown proper. So this cross section shows some changes that might accommodate that. It's really going to one lane of traffic in each direction, but with a left-hand turn pocket to accommodate those traffic flows that need to turn onto El Camino Real, but then offering a full protected bike lane, still a curb lane for parking and other curbside uses, and then a considerably wider sidewalk for outdoor dining and for circulation. And the next slide, similarly, El Camino Real has a very important function as a vehicular corridor, but it also wants to take on a more pedestrian function as the downtown evolves and develops. And so this picks up on some ideas that were adopted in the city's Bike and Ped master plan, and sort of fine-tunes them a little bit more in terms of getting a very strong green element, center median planting strip that then can double as a left-hand turn lane, 2 lanes of travel in each direction with left-hand turn pockets going in both directions, a protected bike lane, nice and wide, 6 feet of travel, 5 feet of buffer, except where you have a bus stop, in which case the bus stop would have 6 feet of a boarding island, and then the bike lane would slip behind that. Wider sidewalks on both sides, etc. So some changes to El Camino Real that I think are quite important to accommodate your changing downtown. And so yeah, we've we can quickly kind of flip through these, but we've been looking at a lot of examples of pedestrian malls. So Ithaca Commons, this is one of the images I showed before. This has been closed for several blocks to be pedestrian only. Pearl Street in Boulder is one that's quite well known. It's been here for a number of years and is, really quite a successful destination in Boulder. The next example is Charlottesville, I believe. And the next slide. And this one I mentioned before with the groves of streets, again, paved from building face to building face, no curbs, and yet emergency and fire access is accommodated through this corridor. And the next slide is Mountain View, which closer to home. Many of you are familiar with what they've done there to close the streets and start to bring in much more pedestrian and function and outdoor dining. And then the next slide is Burlingame, another example close to home. Not a street closure, so this might be more akin to the changes that we're thinking of for the 600 and 800 block, still widening the sidewalks, changing to parallel parking, space for outdoor dining, etc. And the next slide. And yeah, just always keeping in mind and looking for other examples, looking at places like Fort Collins, Santana Row, which has some really interesting ideas about programming the center space, Octavia Boulevard, and the pop-up beer garden that happens there has become quite popular. And then a little further down Octavia with a pop-up retail that happens near Hayes Street. Next slide. So how can we efficiently support this vision for a pedestrianized downtown? So we've in the next slide, we've sort of taken a step back and said, okay, if this red zone is really the pedestrian core of downtown, how can we still come into town from the freeways, from 101, from 280, efficiently get to the places we need to go? What are those main arterials that bring us in and out of town from a larger scale? The importance of Holly, of Britain, of Edgewood, etc. And then zooming in, how do those translate to the closer in picture that Poonam had presented earlier? What are the key arterials for coming in and out of town? Holly and Britain, El Camino Real, of course. How do you get people transferred from Holly onto San Carlos so they can continue on up into their neighborhoods? And how do you get people efficiently into the parking zones that are around downtown, so these blue zones? And how do you do all that without having cars in the pedestrian core? So how do we start to look at that as flows that are going around downtown rather than vehicular flows that are going through downtown? So we've looked at a number of ideas of how to make those flows happen efficiently and smoothly. Another backdrop for this is looking at how the downtown is used for special events. So in one type of event, scenario one, the 700 block is used as is, just as a pedestrian plaza. In scenario, and that's something, incidentally, that has happened, and the circulation patterns have adjusted in many ways. People are finding ways to circulate around that block, not having the use of that 700 block for vehicular access. In scenario two, in certain types of events, the 600 and 800 blocks are temporarily closed to vehicular traffic, and that and San Carlos is maintained with vehicular flows. And then in scenario three, in larger events like the Art and Wine Festival, not only the 600, 700, and 800 blocks are closed, but also the 1100 and 1200 blocks of San Carlos. So this is a really nice thing that's happened in San Carlos, is this sort of flexibility of how you're using these different downtown streets in different ways for different events, closing those streets, reopening them during normal times, for business as usual. So it's a really nice level of flexibility. And so with that in mind, then what might be some of the circulation scenarios that get people around the downtown efficiently. And I'm just going to sort of briefly go through these one by one. So option one is called even distribution. And this is sort of what's happened already, is that the 700 block has been closed, and the hierarchy of all of these streets sort of remains the same, except for El Camino Real, except for Holly coming in and out of downtown, and Britain. But otherwise, people have sort of found their favored routes, and that those traffic flows have sort of redistributed themselves. So scenario one says that you would sort of continue with that as the downtown continues to grow and change. You would encourage this even distribution of flows, still getting people around downtown and still getting them to the parking areas around downtown when their destination is the downtown itself. And in the next slide, option two says, well, no, we're going to take a little bit different approach. We want to be more deliberate about getting people from Holly onto San Carlos Avenue. Elm Street has a greater role as a way to get from Holly to Britain and vice versa. Some people are going to be coming in on Britain and may want to circulate to San Carlos Avenue on Elm Street. So how do you start to create a little bit of hierarchy where El Camino Real still has a large function, and Elm Street has a little bit more function as a crosstown arterial. Laurel Street used to be that arterial, but with the 700 block taken out, is there another street that's designated for that function to help people get around the downtown? And then this third option says that you use Holly and that first segment of Elm Street, that first block between Holly and San Carlos, and you have a swing lane scenario, which operates much like Holly Street does farther east, where the parking lane becomes a commuter lane during rush hour traffic. And so that switches in the morning commute hours and in the evening commute hours to allow an additional lane of flow to come all the way in on Holly Street, and then on that first block of Elm, and then transferring to San Carlos Avenue as those flows do today. Elm still having a fairly important role here to get folks from the north end of downtown down to Britain. So this is just another scenario to think about. And then in the last scenario, actually looking at a one-way loop. So Holly Street becomes one way from El Camino Real all the way to Elm Street. That first block of Elm becomes one way, and San Carlos becomes one way from Elm Street all the way to El Camino Real. El Camino Real, of course, remains two-way and completes the fourth leg of that loop. But this would be a way to really accommodate commute traffic in and out of downtown morning and evening in a very efficient way. So those are just explorations. It's fairly early in our process. I think we're looking for some feedback on the pros and cons of those different scenarios. So that's one thing that we'd like to get into a little bit in the breakout session.
Everyone's being brought back into the room. I can say most definitely that my group had a lot of things to share, and we didn't make it through all of the 6 boards. And I don't know, how many other groups were you able to kind of get through all of the 6 boards? It looks like I'm getting a lot of heads shaking no. So we apologize for that, understanding that there was a lot of material that was shared this evening. And we have some next steps that we want to share with you. And I think I'll just speak to this now. In case you don't otherwise already know, we have an in-person event this coming Saturday, right next to Pete's in downtown San Carlos. The address is 677 Laurel Street. It's the place of the former living room, which has now been closed, and the property owner has agreed to let us use that space. So we will be there this Saturday, December the 9th, beginning at 10 a.m. all the way to 3 p.m. We're going to have two presentations, one at 10:30 and then another one at 1:30. And there will be a lot of additional ways where you can share your feedback on what was presented this evening. In addition to the Saturday workshop, we are also going to be putting together a survey. So we're going to send everyone here that's attending tonight an email where you can put additional thoughts and be responsive to this survey that will be on the project website in the near future. And once again, the project website is sancarlosdowntownplan.com. And you can go there and access the survey. But right now, we do want to take a couple minutes to share from some of the different groups. So we have a number of different facilitators here. Maybe I can start with Poonam, if you want to start with your group. And then you can pass the mic to whichever facilitator, and we can start to hear what was shared within these groups. So I'm going to stop talking. You go.
Okay, great. We were hoping that the group representatives would do the report back, but I got nominated to be the group representative in my group. So I'm going to try to capture the engaging conversation that we had. Our group was really big on making sure that there's a lot of shade and trees in the in downtown. We talked about parklets and how currently the parklets aren't necessarily creating an inviting or openness an inviting experience or an openness in the downtown, because they seem like tall walls on either side of the street. So any kind of outdoor seating is very welcome, but any kind of outdoor seating that does not create that visual barrier would be a lot more welcome. There were some concerns about the water feature for a few different reasons. One was about safety, with just the idea of kids kind of like getting wet and running around, and maybe how then like entering stores, but also in terms of maintenance and how maintenance and upkeep over time of the water features. The group also talked about sorry, I muted myself. What do we want to be? Do we want to be local, very local focused, or we want to be regional? And while there is, certainly a desire to have a much more local feeling through the type of experiences, type of businesses, as well as the way that the spaces are designed and the scale of the plazas and public spaces to create that intimate and cozy feeling. I think there is openness to sort of taking a hybrid approach, which is to still, make it an attractive destination for people from other communities to come and spend time here. There was some discussion around the one-way circulation possibility of Holly and San Carlos being a one-way street, but we didn't get a chance to dive into the details of that and hear everybody's thoughts on that. But I'll wrap up there. And then we have taken down a lot of notes on the Miro board as well.
Thank you, Poonam. Who would like to go next? With any other facilitator like to share?
I'm happy to go. We're happy to go. David, are you still good to do a little report back for our group, and others maybe could chime in, fill in the blanks?
I was not taking notes. So I don't know, do you have notes?
Yeah, I mean, let's see. Yeah, I mean, maybe I could just say, maybe we could just reverse those roles. I can maybe sketch out just an outline of the discussion, but you should definitely feel free to fill in. So I think we talked a lot about the merits of the two different schemes of the 700 block. I think one school of thought saying that it's going to be more efficient in the promenade scheme to accommodate equitable outdoor dining for all the restaurants, versus another school of thought which said, it might be nice to have those those sort of interruptions of the space as you go down the corridor, so that the plaza feels complete even at times where there's not many people there. And so there was an aspect of that I think resonated with some. What else? I think we got into some discussion about the 600 block options. Just you know, the nature of parklets, why were the parklets built in the first place, and if we did away with those and restaurants wanted to have their outdoor dining up against the store, could they still have the weather protection? You know, and if there are ways to do that, which there seem to be, if you look in a lot of European cities, that's now another big cost for these business owners. You know, they've just built their parklet in the last few years, and now, you know, now they're being asked to build something else. So I think that is a consideration. What am I missing, David? Oh, another consideration was just the local labor opportunity and internships, carpenter jobs. Could the implementation of some of these improvements benefit, you know, local workers, not only experienced carpenters and laborers, but people that want to get into the industry? Could there be internships for teaching? So I think that was also well received.
Okay, I'll go next. I know we want to honor our time to finish and let folks go by 7:30. I was in a group with Sonia Elks, Michael and Caroline, excuse me, Mark and Caroline, and then Michael as well. So our group, everybody liked the vision. They thought we were right on target, which was really good to hear, that we're moving in the right direction with respect to the vision. As far as the 700 block concept, there were some comments about bicycle just access into the area, like how are we going to manage that? That there wasn't a really clear delineation of how bikes move in and out of the area, and really wanting to make sure that we have a plan for that and provide for necessary bicycle infrastructure, such as safe bicycle parking, recognizing that some people have, you know, few members in our group have gotten rid of their second car and have purchased e-bikes, and that's what they use. And so they're navigating our downtown in that way. So we want to make sure that it's bicycle accessible and bicycle friendly in places for to park store bikes safely. The other question had to do about the parklets and what is our plan for the parklets, and wanting to make sure that the designs really are conducive to having things being more visible and open with chairs and seating that, you know, creates more porosity and visibility into the great number of businesses that we have along Laurel Street. The other concern was about businesses on Laurel and making sure that they are able to thrive and survive with respect to these transformations. And, you know, what is our plan for that? And how do we make sure that the businesses there can successfully thrive in the area? There was some leaning in our group. A few folks mentioned the garden option is sort of something that they had to choose, although we made it very clear that we're not asking to choose between one or the other, but what are the elements they really liked. And out of the garden option, it was, I think I got this right, Mark and Caroline, let me know if I got this right, but that you're able to meander into kind of these different spaces with different personalities. Maybe a space is, you know, more quiet, maybe there's more activation, but really liking that sort of meandering feel to it. And Mark, excuse me, I'm sorry, Mark and Caroline, would you like to add anything to that or clarify what I just shared?
No.
You don't have to, but I saw you went unmute, so I thought maybe you might wanted to share.
Thumbs up, all good, you got it.
Okay, great. And then, and then another comment for the garden concept, just a clarification question about wanting to make sure that there would be a delineated pedestrian path, like a clear path of travel as one meanders through that concept. So I think people really like that. We didn't get a chance to talk about some of the other things, we're sorry about that, but this is just the beginning of the conversation, and there'll be many more opportunities for you to chime in. I want to pass the baton to another facilitator who would like to go next.
I can go next. I'm Rohit. And in my group, I had Neil, David, Aaron, Sue. And if I'm forgetting any name, forgive me. And we also had a little toddler, 2-year-old, Aaron's daughter. We had a great conversation around, public space design, around businesses and how they can be successful, how they are functioning now. We spoke about mobility aspect, and we spoke about cohesive urban design, experience along the promenade. So talking about the public space design, and Sue, please feel free to jump in if I'm missing something. But we spoke about shade aspect. Our team group members felt that there are a lot of trees planted and it may block sun. So some of that to consider. We discussed about the surface treatment of the plaza, and where there should be lawn, where there should not be lawn, where there should be the material which is easier and safer for everybody to walk on. So the materiality aspect we discussed. We did discuss about the users and how toddler friendly and youth friendly users activities programs could be proposed, and how they should be considered. We also talked about the amenities, such as restrooms, water fountains that are considered for the public space design to complement all these activities. Some good points around pedestrian movement, similar to what Lisa just mentioned, like the clear demarcation of pedestrian movement in the garden concept would be encouraged. In terms of the businesses, it was observed, and Sue has business along the corridor, so she had some good points there. One of those was that a lot of restaurants and dining, businesses are along 700 block, and diversity of businesses would be encouraged. We also talked about consulting all these businesses with the concept so that all of them are in accord with what we are proposing, especially if there are a lot of trees proposed and if they are blocking the signage of the businesses. So some of these aspects need to be, the nitty-gritties need to be factored in. We also talked about equity of businesses and how we can attract different local businesses into the vision. In terms of the mobility and connectivity, we talked about zooming out and looking at the overall connection to the downtown. And within that, if one is accessing the downtown on Holly Street, the intersection of Holly and Old County Road is something which is critical, has been pointed out. That's where a lot of bottleneck happens. So some attention to that was, suggested. In our project area, Elm as an arterial is something which the group didn't favor, mostly considering the residents who are living on Elm Street in the residential area. So conversion of Elm can affect, some of those inhabitants. And in terms of the urban design vision, some standardization for parklet is something which was suggested to look into, and some aspects of garden design concepts were preferred over the promenade concept. And yeah, these are all the points. But if I'm missing something, Sue, if you want to add something.
No, well done.
Great. So I'll pass it on to Ashwin.
All right. And Early from my group has volunteered to summarize our comments. And thank you, Early.
Yeah, no problem. Hey guys, on our group, let's see, first to talk about the 700 block, I think we had a lot of discussion about the different designs, and what emerged was people seem to like the sinuous design where it's not so much of a straight shot, but you've got the bulb outs and you kind of wind your way through the trees. A lot of people like that just because it's calming in all ways. It's calming to traffic and then calming to people. And when you have bikes in the mix, it'll also ensure a lower speed for the bikes. So it's safer. One thing people brought up was that we need to make sure that the project opens up to both the El Camino businesses as well as the businesses who rely on the alleys that are, the service corridors for this whole area. One remark was that, El Camino businesses seem to be struggling, and it would be interesting to see how this project can help them. By means of making it easy for shoppers who are walking in the pedestrian zone to get over to the El Camino businesses as well. On the 700 block, one of the things people remarked was the need for some scooter and bike parking, and this might even be in the area of the 600 and 800 blocks, that a lot of people will be as more and more, as one of the other groups said, more people are switching to e-bikes and e-scooters and things. And a lot of times they need a place nearby to park those things, and not for very long typically. So you don't need a ton of space, but it would be useful. Likewise, there was a question about whether there's space for bike share in the future, especially because we're close to the train station, whether we'd have bike share bikes. There was some concern that there's not enough room for the wider street furniture like fountains, whether that might impede pedestrians getting through and, the larger number of people that we want to accommodate. Let's see. On the 600 and 800 blocks, there was a lot of support in our group for at least checking out whether one-way streets are an option. I think people mentioned the simplicity and the safety of having one-way routing. Because right now you've got a lot of left turns, right turns. It gets a little crazy down there as it is right now. One of the things that we didn't see in the plan for the 600 block, I believe, was there are no bike lanes in that plan. So some accommodation needs to be added for bikes there, because quite a bit of bike traffic, I think we could expect on both 600 and 800 blocks. Let's see what else. And people mentioned the importance of the Cherry Street drop off, because a lot of people they drop off family members right there at Cherry Street, and that becomes quite a little, a hold up for people right now, Cherry and Laurel Street. And I think one of the other things people mentioned was the idea of a hierarchy of parking availability. You make the parking, as you get further away from the 700 block, you make it a little easier to park, just to encourage people not to come charging in and trying to get really close with their cars if they don't need to. And let's see. And then finally, there was a vote in favor of embracing more and more city blocks as time goes by, just to think about how this can expand organically over time. And that's it from us.
Hey, Lisa, I forgot an important one from my group. Can I just add it?
Of
2
course.
seconds. Yeah, really good point was made about public seating, including tables and chairs that are non-proprietary. So if people buy food takeout or they bring their own food, they just want to sit in a public place, there's plenty of tables and chairs in addition to benches, so that it's really just very accessible to everybody. So yeah, I just wanted to register that one.
Great, thank you so much. Wow, I think we've gone through all the facilitators. It's 7:31. Sorry for keeping you a little bit over, but before we close, I just really wanted to extend my gratitude and thanks for all of you taking the time to register, join in, and basically sit and receive such a wealth of information about possibilities for our downtown. I hope you continue to stay involved, share with your friends. We have an in-person event on Saturday, December the 9th. Stop by. It's right next to Pete's Downtown, 677 Laurel Street. Thanks to Judy for putting that in the chat. We have a couple of announcements for next steps. I mentioned the in-person event. We are going to have a post-event survey, like I mentioned before, so more opportunities to kind of dive in a little bit deeper with anything you might want to add or didn't get a chance to share. We are going to be preparing a summary report from all of the community feedback that we received from this platform, from the in-person event that we're going to be have. And then also our survey that we are going to be launching very in the near future. We're going to take all of this to our Planning and Transportation Commission and our City Council to share all of the community feedback and get some guidance from them. There was a question that somebody asked in my group, and I just want to share before I let you all go. How long is this project going to take? We started it in 2022. We want to have a specific plan, a new plan that gives all the direction for this future transformation adopted by our City Council in January or February 2025. So this is what we have, one more year to go. We're going to have more workshops and more opportunities to connect with you all and continue to talk about transformation of the downtown. So with that, I think I've got everything for this evening that I wanted to share. And just thank you all for participating. Really appreciate it. And hopefully we get to meet some of you in person on Saturday. If not, we'll see you at the next round. Thank you all so much. Great job sharing all of your thoughts and ideas with the city. We need you to be able to create a good plan. Thanks. And until soon, bye.
Thanks, everyone. Good night.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.